As far as the actual group home business itself, I don't spend much time. I log on. I look to see what the bookkeepers, have done, how much money we made, and then I cut distribution checks. That's really it.
Welcome to the Group Home Riches Podcast. If you have the desire to be your own boss, create your own schedule, and become financially free while at the same time helping people in need, then you've come to the right place. At grouphomeriches.com, we teach people exactly like yourself how to get started in the group home business. And on this podcast, you're going to hear their stories firsthand.
I was just kind of breaking down for him that we have an hour, so we'll wrap it up around 4:00. Yep. We'll kind of answer everybody's questions, but really we want to show them how to get to the point that you are, right? Which is working on the business and not in the business. And you know, at what I think you got to that point, Andy, like around your fourth or fifth home, right?
No, realistically, it was more or less right at the first one, because I knew right off the bat what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to be involved in the day-to-day management. So I had a manager right off the bat, and I was involved. I was definitely more operationally involved. I mean, I was helping to find furniture. I was helping to even go out and get clients, and I was sending out emails. But Brandon, you're right. Probably about by number 3, I really wasn't involved at all with anything. So
yeah, in the beginning, it was mainly just like the marketing and everything like that, right?
Yeah. It was primarily marketing. I mean, that's always been kind of my strength and my forte. But even with the marketing, I mean, most of what I was doing back then, I mean, I had an old school fax machine,
right?
And I just gathered up a bunch of phone numbers for all the various hospitals, and I would sit there it's total waste of my time, but I would do it because it was very easy to do, and I could still read and listen to music or whatever, and I would just run that exact same piece of paper through that fax machine for like 3 or 4 or 5 hours, and it was going to all the hospitals in the entire region. So I would do that, and then I would blast out emails, and they were cut and paste emails. And this is really, quite frankly, before the days of MailChimp, before the days of ActiveCampaign, before any of that. So it was, that was really what I was doing.
And that's how long did it take you to get that first home filled up after doing that?
Oh man, we probably had it full, I don't know, within full at, 90 to 100% occupancy within the first month and a half at most. The minute we went over to the hospital, and I say we got a client. So I don't remember how we got this guy. I think his name was Larry. Oh, you know what happened was, I think it was a property that I was buying. And it was a property I was buying, and it was a group home, and I didn't want to utilize it as a group home. I was going to just fix it up and flip it, which is exactly what I did. But I took that guy, Larry, and we moved him over into this other property that we had set up as a group home. And then that led us to his caseworker over at the hospital. And then that caseworker turned us on to like 4 or 5 people. The next thing you knew, we were at full occupancy. And that's exactly how the business works.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of the average time that I see our members that really get rocking and rolling and implement everything. Once they get the house and get it set up and start implementing the marketing, the homes seem to be filled within a few weeks.
We did that one, Brandon, that I think I sent you a picture on the other day with the bunk beds and everything.
Yeah.
And anyways, the manager on that one, he texted me, I don't know, a week or so later, and he said, "Hey, I just got a call from the Salvation Army." I said, "Oh, that's cool." So he went over to the Salvation Army, and he became, he's a very friendly guy, and he met up with one of the caseworkers who he met through one of the clients, and that caseworker proceeded to send him like 6 or 7 people. So that home, it's not totally full because we got bunk beds in it, but he's forecasted to have that thing bringing in, I think he told me, like $9,000 next month.
And once it's stabilized, I think it was going to be over like 10, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably. I mean, at this point, and at the beginning, trust me, I paid attention to every last nickel. Every $50 a month I was paying attention to. At this point, when there's a lot of money coming in, you don't really look at everything because, quite frankly, you can't. So it's a good problem to have. By no means am I Steve Mnuchin or any of those, crazy wealthy people. But, once there's a chunk of money coming in every month, you can't watch every last $50 expense. It just becomes too difficult.
Right. Well, I'm going to. You mentioned as we continue and answer the questions and everything. I'm going to show you folks kind of the stuff inside the gold course that we cover. So Andy mentioned that he's in the beginning he would just sending out those faxes, right, and emails and things like that. If you go into the important documents section of the gold course, in the marketing documents, you could get the same script, the same fax, the same email that Andy used to fill that home up in a few weeks. So I'm gonna continue to point stuff out like that as we follow them. Another thing you mentioned the Salvation Army, which in a lot of areas I see they're one of the organizations that get a lot of grant money from the government to help with they call it rapid rehousing. So really in the beginning, the very first thing that people can do out there, especially in this time of lockdown, right? You got nothing else to do. Build your marketing list. You need a list of hospitals, caseworkers, organizations to market to. So this is the very first step. So if you go into this, how to build your marketing list, you watch a video on how to do it and set up an email campaign. And then there's a keyword guide here to help you find some organizations. And Salvation Army is one of those that you're definitely going to want to get on your list, figure out who you need to talk to, and get referrals. as you mentioned, they sent, what was it, 6 people right off the bat?
Yeah, and that was just Zach going over there talking to the folks, and all because of one client we had. And then he became friends. I say friends, but good acquaintances with this guy over at the Salvation Army, and maybe it was a lady, I don't know. But yeah, next thing he knew, his phone was ringing off the hook, and he's got this place almost all filled up.
Yeah. And we call it marketing and sales. That's technically what you're doing, but it's not like a hard sell, right? I mean, you don't have to talk to them on how beautiful the home is or anything like that. Most of the times these people are just refreshed to be speaking with a landlord that's willing to work with them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. If I can comment on that.
Absolutely.
There is so much demand for this type of housing out there, especially right now, and there's limited supply. And we all know what happens when supply outpaces or underpaces demand. It just becomes exceedingly easier and easier and easier to sell. So to Brandon's point, it is not a hard sell whatsoever. It's simply just telling people, hey, we have properties. We have beds available for folks to live in with whatever type of people are in need of housing. We can provide that housing for them. And that's all you really have to do. But you definitely need to make an effort. You got to go out there. You got to become known within your community. And if you don't let people know who you are and what you're doing, your phone's not going to ring.
Right. So we have a couple questions have come in. I think we can kind of break down. There's a lot of similar questions just on getting started, right? So we're in Texas. Why don't you break down, how long it took for you to get licensed with the state and what you needed to do for zoning in Texas, and then how difficult.
Why are you making me laugh, Brandon?
then how difficult is it to get started in other areas of the country like New York or Virginia? They're wondering what those steps are going to look like there also.
I've got a big in my face. Okay. So, the funny thing is with this business, you don't need to have a license. Okay. And I remember people asking me this question, 15 years ago, well, don't you have to have a license and everything else? And I'm thinking to myself, what about all these huge college housing organizations that have 4, 5, or 6 students living in a bedroom, do they have to have a license? And obviously the answer is no. So you don't need to have a license to run this sort of operation. And the reason that you don't, especially doing it the way that we teach in the Gold course, is because, and the way that I do it, is because we don't provide any sort of medical treatment. We don't have doctors on staff. We don't have any of that stuff. We outsource everything, and we just do it through home health. So yeah, you do not need to have a license to operate this sort of business if you do it and if you operate it the same way that we do and the same way that I do. Does that answer your question, Brandon?
Yes, and I did. I asked that. I was being facetious, but that is the most common thing that people run into and they come across when they're just getting started out. I speak to a lot of people that they don't realize that, and they go through the process of becoming licensed, which is, it takes about 6 to 12 months if people can even get through the paperwork, and it costs thousands to go through that. And it's going to come with extra rules and regulations and inspections, and you got to do more upgrades. You're going to be managing, you're going to be managing a staff of nurses. So there are, there's advantages and disadvantages to each model, of course. And you can follow our model, or you can build upon it. But the kind of thing that we really need to hammer most of the new people, our new members, is that you don't need to be licensed.
Yeah, you don't have to have a license. And the other thing that I always try to mention to folks when I am chatting with them is, if you want to get licensed, that's awesome. But it's going to cost you probably $20,000 or $30,000 to get a license and to get licensed. Why don't you just get some cash flow going first? And if we can show you how to make, $2,000 or $3,000 from one home, and then you set up another home, and now you have $6,000. You set up another home, now you have $9,000. Okay, well, if you can live off 3 and you can pocket 6 per month, you do that for 3 months. Now you have $18,000 saved up. Do that for another month. Now you can afford the license. But most people don't even have the $25,000 that's going to be needed to get the license. So the smartest way to approach it, if you really want to be a licensed facility, is to set out and run it the way that we teach in the Gold course, and then build up your cash flow that way. And then once you've got your 20 or 30 grand saved up, if you want to reinvest it rather into buying more homes, you can invest it into getting licensed.
Right. And you could technically, you'd be able to charge more, right? Because you're getting paid for providing the care. But, do you want to run a company like that? That, it just depends on what everyone's goals are. And we find that, about 99% of the people I speak with, their goals are, hey, I just want to help people out and make good money while I can do that. So why not go the path of least resistance, So what we do is essentially we're just offering affordable housing, charge around, $600 to $700 per bed, and typically a roommate situation. Mm-hmm. And then if anybody does need like a nurse on hand or anything like that, Andy's not going to, he's not going to go get his nurse degree. No. He's not going to go get a license. He's not going to hire a nurse. He just simply outsources it to home health companies.
And there are literally thousands of home health companies in every single state out there. And they would be more than happy to come on over to your property, because they're going to make money every time they come over to see one of your clients. And chances are, if you've got 10 clients at your property, and each client is worth, for sake of argument, $500 a month to that home health agency, you might be able to create a relationship with them.
Yeah. And if anybody, I recommend the first thing you do after you join the Gold course, just watch this video called Understanding the Business Model. It's in the beginner section. It's going to break down why this is legal, why, to answer everyone's question, why you can do it in any state, in any city, okay? Because we're adhering to federal laws. All right, like the Fair Housing Act, for example, and that's going to be broken down. There's way more information on it in the legal section of the important documents, the licensing and the Fair Housing Act document here.
And that's a very important section in the gold course.
I mean, there's so much information in this gold course. This license agreement right here is is worth the price of the gold course and then some.
It'll save you. I mean,
you're gonna
real quick, Brandon.
Yeah, for sure.
So people sometimes will ask, our consulting clients or whatever, Andy, I got this client, or Brandon, I got this client. I need to get them out of the property. Do I need to file an eviction on them? And we always tell them, if you go and stay at the Ritz-Carlton or you go stay at the Motel 6, it doesn't matter, and you don't pay your Motel 6 bill, is Motel 6 going to have to evict you? And the answer is a resounding no, they don't. Because essentially what you've done, you've signed a license agreement with Motel 6, the Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons, what have you. They don't have to evict, they just lock you out. And so that's how we operate as well.
Yeah, so that another very common misconception, and probably what holds back a lot of real estate investors, landlords typically is, I mean, you do rentals too, right? So think of your like worst tenant, right? Like they're imagining possibly now 10 people like that and going through the eviction process, which is why a lot of landlords, aren't doing this. They're imagining like they've gone through the eviction process before. It's super stressful. And now they're imagining doing that with possibly 10 people now. So this document here is key. You would pay a lawyer more in their hourly rate to draft something up like this for you, and you're going to need it. So this essentially, like Andy said, if someone breaks your house rules, this gives you the right to ask them to leave.
They're gone. I mean, it's that simple. The other really cool thing with this is that you have in this business model, you have a house manager that's going to report to you. Now, eventually, if you have enough group homes, you're going to have a manager that's going to oversee, give or take, about 10 house managers. But those house managers are overseeing, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people on a daily basis. Do you know what your clients are doing? Versus right now, if I have a client that removes a smoke detector, I don't know that. But when you have a house manager and you've got video monitoring and everything else, the house manager is going to tell you, and actually you don't even want them to tell you, you just want them to take care of it themselves, and go and reprimand that particular tenant or client. And, if they disobey or they violate the house rules again, you lock them out. They get kicked out just like they would at Motel 6 or the Four Seasons.
Yep. So, and the reason why when you check into the hotel, like you mentioned, you sign their little check-in sheet, agreeing to the rules. This license agreement is your check-in, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. So that and yes, you can do it in any state. All right, any state, any city. We operate in Central Texas, but we adhere to the federal laws. So one thing that can come up, and often does, is, and we operate in cities that have this too. They'll put in their local code, they'll put stuff like you can't have more than 4 or 6 unrelated occupants in a home. But why we can still operate is because that's against federal law.
It's against federal law, and they are actually related if you read the Fair Housing Act.
Yep. So there's a really large sober living organization called the Oxford House, and they have a long record and case history of challenging those local laws. So wherever you guys are at, do a quick Google search called Oxford House in your area, and just look at the homes that are operating in your area. I do this everywhere. Every coaching call I have, I'll show people that have that question. Hey, can I do this in Virginia? They have this law that says I can't have more than 4 people, blah, blah, blah. it's a direct violation of the Fair Housing Act. And like Andy said, the large majority of the populations that you're going to be serving are a protected class.
Yep.
And they've been found, and there's plenty of court cases that show that people living in this environment are under what's it called, familial. they operate as a family, so they're considered a family. So
and if I can comment real quick, Brandon,
yeah,
one thing that's really important is being a good neighbor. And as long as you're being a good neighbor, you're cutting the yard, you're keeping it clean, you're keeping a watchful eye on all your clients, quite frankly, you're not really going to have to contend with any of this stuff. You're not going to have to worry about code compliance. You're not going to have to worry about, breaking any of these laws, because nobody's really going to complain. The only time that this stuff pops up is when something happens. Maybe you've got, and don't get me wrong, I mean, it is a business. You're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. The best days are, of course, the beginning of the month, because that's typically when you cut your distribution check. But the only time that things really seem to pop up is if a client, and again, it does happen, but maybe a client does start using alcohol again, or maybe they start using drugs again or whatever. And these things, again, they do happen. But if that happens, the neighbors will probably notice it. The neighbors are going to start complaining. And that's when you could have an issue. So rule number 1, be a good neighbor. Rule number 2, see rule number 1.
Yeah. So, and these first couple questions, I really just want to bang out like those very first common misconceptions, and because we know it like the back of our head, but the kind of everybody when they first start on their quest to search how to do this, those are those common questions. So those first couple that we got, hey, does this work in New York? Does this work in Virginia? Yeah, it works everywhere. The demand everywhere. Zoisa, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. She asked, does it work in Brooklyn? And then we have a couple other questions about the houses, right? So, and the rates. So those are kind of all. We'll break that down here in this next little segment. So what do you look for in a home? How do you set the rates? And would it work in a place like Brooklyn? Possibly. But where I'm getting at, you want to make it affordable compared to a 1-bedroom or studio in your area, right? So $500 or $600 to live in a place is extremely affordable where we operate. You're looking at, with all the bills, you can't really find a place for less than $1,000 unless it's in a war zone. So, there's no exact formula to set what your rates are going to be. You just want to make it affordable. Mm-hmm. And in general, technically it could work in a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom home, right? But that's not really what we're looking for. So why don't you kind of break down what type of home do you look for, how many bedrooms, and why do you want as many bedrooms as you can get?
So let's start with Zoisa's first question regarding rates, and I'll just kind of echo your comments on that, Brandon. Here in Central Texas, or really a lot of the sand states, if you will, not non-sand states, but the flyover states, if you will, if you're in that 500 to probably 650 range, and maybe even a little bit less, depending on the area. I mean, if you're up in Ohio, I think Jose is one of our Gold Course clients. What does Jose charge, Brandon? Do you recall?
I think he was at like 400 or 500. It was a little less than we do, but it's just because the cost of living is a little bit less there.
He's in Cleveland. Where is he, in Cleveland, or what part of Ohio?
He was in Dayton.
Okay, so he's in Dayton, but I mean, up in Dayton, you can buy a house for next to nothing. So then he goes out there and he charges us $400 a month. For us, we're going to be, as Brandon said, on a single room, in that $500 to probably $700 range. And then obviously it goes up from there. We do have different levels and different tiers depending on the overall level of responsibility that we have for that particular client. But that $500 to $700 range is a really good range for us. If you're up in the Midwest, you could probably be a little bit lower. If you are in Brooklyn, or you're in a higher rent district, or even out on the left coast in California, you're going to be able to get away with a lot more. I think you're probably going to be able to get away with 700 to probably 950, I would presume. Brandon, you used to live in Northern California. What do you think?
Oh yeah, probably I was in San Jose, and this was like 7 years ago. You couldn't even find an apartment for less than $1,500.
Yeah, there you go. So a lot of it's going to be case by case, but you definitely want to come in, as Brandon said, you want to come in at an affordable rate. That way you've got a lot of client demand. The other thing to take into consideration is that we provide housing for folks that are typically going to be on SSI or SSDI. For those of you that are new to this, that's going to be Social Security income or Social Security disability income. So these folks are all getting checks every single month for $600 to typically $800 a month, at least in our neck of the woods.
The average nationwide is 1,300, 12 or 1,300.
There you go. So yeah, sometimes I don't even really know. In California, though, there are people that are on SSI and SSDI, and they're making a couple $1,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Sad to say, but it's almost an income stream for a lot of folks. So if you can come in and you can provide, we actually provide food at a lot of our locations, but if you can provide housing, which is going to encompass your utilities, your water, your gas, your electric, telephone, TV, pretty much anything and everything that people need to live, and you can do that for $600 or $650, and the person doesn't have to worry about a thing. They don't have to worry about making their payments. They don't have to worry about the Time Warner cable bill, the Spectrum bill, the water bill. They don't have to worry about any of that. All they have to do is cut one check to you each and every month for $700. And quite frankly, the best part of it is that they're not the one cutting the check. The way that we do it, we make sure that either we are set up as the representative payee, i.e. the beneficiary, or 99% of the time, we're going to work with a rep payee organization like the Salvation Army. There's a number of them out there.
So this people will probably have some questions on that, and that's what we created this how to get paid guide for. So, and that will answer someone asked about, if a tenant doesn't pay, how do you kick them out? Do you prorate them? Typically, so we're offering affordable housing to people that 99% of the people aren't going to qualify for any type of other living situation, right? You have to have good credit, clean history, good rental history, 3 times the income. We're taking in people like that, but we're not just giving them a lease. We're not letting them have free reign on the property, and we're not just going to hope that they pay us every month.
We don't play the hope and pray game.
Yeah, so you want to get set up to get guaranteed payments. That is key. Licensing space to the people is key. You're not leasing the home to 10 people, and getting a guaranteed check is key. So you can become their payee, or you can require them to go through a third-party payee program. Or oftentimes, if you're with your marketing, if you're marketing to the right organizations, you get paid directly by like nonprofits and things like that. So Tarsha asked, how do you cover the food and the essentials for everybody? Look, we said that first property is it's going to be bringing in $10,000 per month. That's your funding. It's not a government grant. A government grant, it's. I can send you guys information on a government grant, and don't ask me any questions on it because it's 80 pages of legalese. So
why would you want to even do that? I mean,
yeah, it's a
waste of your time. I mean, we have some of our clients they don't even have bunk beds. They've got triple bunks. And I mean, again, we don't do that because we like to make sure that we don't have super crowded locations. We typically just have 2 to a room, but depending on the element that we're providing housing for, we will do bunk beds. And that's the one that I think I sent you a text on, Brandon.
Yep.
Bunk beds. And so it will gross a lot of money. So going back to that next question that Zoyza had about location and what types of properties we're looking for,
Right.
You really don't want 2 bedrooms. And quite frankly, we don't even really want 3 bedrooms, because if you follow my model, which is typically 2 to a room, and don't get me wrong, you can do 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, but we try to make ours very habitable and nice because we want a good reputation with all the social workers out there. So that's why we typically stick to 2 to a room. But if you only are doing 2 to a room and you have a 3-bedroom property, you can only have 6 people living in the property. So your revenues are kind of capped out. So what I usually look for is I'm looking for a 4-bedroom or a 5-bedroom home. And again, you guys can go out there and lease these properties. I own them. I prefer to own them because it's very obvious why. You can build up a lot of wealth. If you own the real estate, you can pay it off very fast as well. And if you own it, then what we usually do is I'll send the guys over there to turn a 4-bedroom, 2-bath home that has a garage into a 6-bedroom home. So we'll convert the garage into 2 rooms and we'll run the AC ducts and everything else. But now I have 6 rooms. So I have 12 people living in the property. And if each individual is paying $600, now I'm making $7,200 a month. And so the numbers can start adding up really fast, especially if you've bought the property in a middle income neighborhood. So we don't buy these properties. I don't buy these properties in upper income neighborhoods. They're typically going to be middle to lower income neighborhoods, because if I can buy them for cheap, then my mortgage payment's going to be less and there's going to be more net cash flow spread for me to take out of the property each and every month. So that's really the business model.
So let me break that down a little bit more. So let's say you mentioned getting like a 4 or 5 bedroom and converting the garage. So I know a couple of the properties and like one of the neighborhoods, right?
Yeah.
You would be able to, if you wanted to be a landlord and rent that out, you maybe get what, like $1,500 for the properties?
Yep, exactly.
So you're basically, 10xing your cash flow by doing this, rather than make, $200 or $300 a month after paying your mortgage. You're bringing in, after expenses, it's around like $3,000 on average.
Correct. And a lot of it's going to depend on the size of the property. I mean, if you have a 5-bedroom or a 6-bedroom home, you could have one house and it's making you $4,000 a month. But on average, for me at least, because I do have 3 bedrooms, 4-bedroom, and 5-bedroom homes, on average, it's going to be about $2,500 a month, just give or take.
Nice. And here's another thing for folks to think about out there. When you are looking to lease or purchase a property, there's not going to be a big difference in price between a 3-bedroom home or a 5-bedroom home. There'll be no difference in price if the garage is converted. If anything, a traditional renter or buyer, they want that garage for extra storage. No one needs 5 bedrooms typically, so you can't really get much more for it. But with this business model, your revenue will directly correlate with the amount of bedrooms. So that's another huge benefit. So, the more bedrooms you get, the more revenue you're going to get. So, kind of a long answer that I think it just depends on how many bedrooms you can find in Brooklyn, really. If it's just a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, yes, technically you could do it, but you're not really going to really optimize like the business model. So I hope that answers your question, Zoisa. Let's go with Latarsha. Great question. We kind of talked about the rental rate.
Hey, Brandon, do you want to read the question that way everybody can kind of hear it?
Yeah, here's a good one. And it's in the chat too. How are you able to purchase so many properties? Does the bank limit you as an individual?
What a great question.
Really good question.
Yeah, this is a really good question, because this is something that I unfortunately stumbled across and came up upon a long time ago. So my history, I started buying real estate in 2000. And then, as you guys know, you've probably read a lot of the blogs and information. I started doing the group homes a few years after that. But during that time period, there were very loose and lax lending standards. So for all intents and purposes, you could go out there and you could get as many loans as you wanted. So there was a bank out there called Washington Mutual. A lot of you guys may be familiar with it. They went belly up during the last recession. Obviously, now we're in the COVID Corona recession. But anyways, you could go out there and you could get as many loans as you wanted, and then things started tightening up little by little. And the next thing you know, the federal housing guidelines changed, and I think you could only have like 4 properties on your credit report. So at that point in time, I had to go out there and start figuring out how to get money for new properties. And so what I started doing is going over to a lot of the community banks and local credit unions. The credit unions are really the best place to get money because the money's cheaper, and it's typically a little bit easier to get money from the credit unions, in my personal opinion, than it is the community banks. The underwriting is not as stringent. So that's really how I've done it. I have used private money in the past. I did use private money during the last recession, and then I refinanced out of that private money with credit unions and community banks. So that's how I've done it. Is that her total question, or does she have any other?
No, that was it.
Here it is. How are you able to purchase so many properties? Does the bank limit you as an individual? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, one comment on that, though, is that typically at a credit union or at a community bank, they are going to have policies and guidelines that limit how much exposure or risk they can have on an individual client. And typically it's going to range, from 7 to 10% of the net worth of the credit union. So if it's a small credit union, maybe a $50 million credit union or bank shop, and 10% is their credit exposure, they're not going to allow you as a property owner to take out more than about $5 million worth of loans with them, because that would be beyond their policy limit. So that is something else to take into consideration. Fortunately, for most of the folks that we work with, they're not going to really come up and fall upon those guidelines. It's not going to be that big of an issue for them. And if it does, you just move on over to another bank. And
another just huge, valuable piece of information, one of many, and I'm going to keep pointing these out in the gold course, important document section. And this will answer Danielle. You asked about a business plan. Where do you start? Well, buy the gold course, stick around for a special deal on that. Go to the important documents section and you can check out a sample business plan. And this was used to something that you can bring to the banks to kind of show them what you're doing. Obviously, you're going to need to tweak this to your business. But I honestly, Danielle, I'm trying to write a business plan for my group home. Where do I start? We're trying to take in foster youth that's aging out. A business plan, I would focus on revenue generating actions in the beginning of my business. A business plan can be as simple as writing it in a notebook, and looking at it. It's good to have a plan. But unless you're looking to, if you're trying to pitch something to find a partner or get a loan from a bank, yes, you do need a detailed business plan. But I think that's one of those things that a lot of new entrepreneurs kind of get hung up on.
And if I can comment real quick on that business plan, I'm not exaggerating. That business plan made me so much money during the last recession. It was incredible because what it allowed me to do was print it out and go into these various community banks and credit unions that I had already gone in and I wasn't able to get loans. And that, I'm not going to say that was the silver bullet, but that helped me secure funding to buy real estate. And again, it goes back to Brandon's comment earlier. If you just buy a rental property, you can have $200 a month of monthly cash flow. If you buy a property and then you convert it over into a group home, now you have $2,000 a month of monthly cash flow. And if you take that model and that approach and you explain it to a banker along with this business plan, it is so easy to obtain funding. I was getting funding from 2009 to 2011 when there was no liquidity in the marketplace. You could not buy real estate. And so that business plan right there single-handedly created, multiple millions of dollars for me. Not in terms of cash flow, but just in terms of equity buildup from these properties, because properties back then you could buy them for $50,000, $60,000, and today some of them, quite frankly, are worth 10x that. So it's substantial.
So I'm asking a question to everybody out there. What is the number one thing holding you guys back from getting started? And then I want to touch on something else. This business plan, as Andy mentioned, this was used to, not to find a partner, but kind of like a partner with a bank, right? I mean, they're giving you they gave you a ton of capital. But I think a lot of the folks on this call and that come to us, you're probably not in that position yet, right? So, I think that a number one thing holding a lot of people back that I speak with is just the funds to get started, right? And this will, I forget who asked it, but do you need to have a home? Yes, you do need to have a home to operate. So let's go over kind of how to get the home or how to start, or even how do you start with no money, right? So, a lot of people are check to check. You want to make more money, and that's kind of holding people back. So if you go into the beginner's guide, how to find a partner and start with little to no money. If you guys listen to our podcasts and interviews with other successful members, you'll hear them leasing a property or even partnering with a landlord without putting any money down in the beginning. So you touched on, Andy, a good deal for a landlord is making $200, $200 or $300 per month, right?
Yeah, and that's what you think you're making. Most of these landlords aren't making that because the property's going to go vacant. You're going to have maintenance, repair operations, and all these additional expenses. So,
and it's passive, right? Completely passive.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Let me tell you guys a story of my family member. He's in upstate New York. Him and his business partner have around 50 properties. Andy, how much do you think they brought home in profit last year?
On 50 properties?
Yep.
I can do the math for you pretty quickly.
So let everybody put your guesses in there. On 50 rental properties in New York, how much do you think my family member profited off of those?
So 50, and what are they? Just individual single family homes? What are they?
Mostly single families.
Okay. And what are the average rents on them?
They're in Albany, so I would say like 1,000 to 2,000.
Okay, so call it $1,200 a pop, maybe something like that.
Something, yeah.
So $60,000 a month. Your time multiplied by 12. You got 720,000 coming in. Realistically, it wouldn't surprise me if they made 50 to 65,000.
So net. Danielle thinks 10K, closer. I've had people on calls. You think landlords are rich, right? When you hear 50 properties in New York, the average is like, oh, he's got to be a millionaire, right? On paper, they're doing great. They lost money.
Yeah, I believe it.
So, and this is getting to how to find a partner and start with little to no money. Imagine if you found someone like that and explain this business model to them. And this is kind of the first step for beginners out there. You need to know why this is so much better than a rental model. One, you're gonna 10x the cash flow. We already broke that down. How instead of bringing in $1,500 on a property, we're bringing in over $7,000. All right, you have more control over the property. And you're not going to be having to go through the eviction court. You're not going to have a ton of repairs because you have way more control over the property. So these stressed out landlords, they're kind of sold the idea that all you need to do is get, 10 properties. It's completely passive and you'll bring in like $3,000 per month. And it never works out like that. Do you know any?
Unless, of course, you've put 60 or 70% down, which, let's be honest, 9 out of 10 people aren't doing that. You have to use leverage at the beginning in some capacity. So,
yeah. So, imagine if you went to somebody like this. Hey, Andy, I see you have a rental property. It's vacant. You're asking $1,500. I've been investing in this new business model. I've been studying for 6 months. I have a website up. I have a business model where I think I can bring in $7,000 on that property. I'm going to be doing all the marketing, all the managing, and you'll never get a call on this property again. I just need a property to operate out of. Would you be interested in hearing more about that?
Hell yes.
I mean, what landlord is going to say no to that?
I mean, I'm at the point right now where what I primarily do is I look for people to kind of partner up with, if you will. I look for operators.
Yeah.
People that are willing to go out and do what I did 15, 20 years ago, because number one, I don't want to do it anymore. But number two, I don't have the time, right? I'm doing different things now. So, like, for example, right now I've got this young kid in Central Texas. I think he's 21 years old. He's in Killeen and on the Army base and everything else. And I've done a couple of deals with him. He's 21, but I can tell he's got what it takes. He's willing to hustle. He's willing to get his hands dirty. He's on it. And those are the sort of individuals that I personally want to partner up with. So he's not running group homes for me yet, but I have mentioned it to him. He's interested. I'm trying him out with some other stuff right now, but this is what I'm looking for. I personally am the sort of person that you guys need to go out there and find. And by the way, I had people like this that were my partners and my mentors. I had a gentleman who was a doctor that had made a lot of money, and he was willing to take a chance on me. And just like I had bankers that were willing to take a chance on me. So, and I did that with really no money. And if I may, Brandon, the first deal that I did was a condominium, right in Dallas. And I think that thing cost me $2,000 to buy. I bought it for $58,000. And I should send the HUD over to you, Brandon. You can kind of put it up and do a little video on it or what have you. But it cost me $2,000 to buy. Well, anybody and their mother can come up with $2,000. And if you say you can't, then you're not working that hard, because you can go, I guarantee you, I see homeless people every single day of the week, and these guys are making hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars literally on the corner with their signs. And they're not even working that hard. They're not dancing. They're not playing the drums. So imagine if you get out there and you're actually willing to like wash windows or dance or do some crazy gimmick for some handouts. You can come up with $2,000 and you can put it away pretty quickly. So it is possible.
Yeah. And then this, let's see, using that pitch, what would be a good upsell to offer the owner and landlord as incentive for them to buy in? With Tarsha, everything's going to be negotiable. So, some folks, like if they have absolutely no money to start, I would offer like a partnership, a split of the revenue. Mm-hmm. But a lot of landlords out there, they just want to get paid on time and not get called. So if you can you come to them in a position of what they're going to get out of it, even if you're looking to lease the property, right? You usually have to get them to work with you on their subletting policy. You need to kind of convince them what they're going to get out of it. And that's what this guide will show you and give you an exact script to use.
So Zoe's asked another question. Do the residents need access to the main kitchen, or is a kitchenette good enough? Again, one kitchen is going to be totally fine for, 5, 6, 7 people. And as you guys probably know from reading our blogs, we've got lower functioning properties, higher functioning properties. On the lower functioning properties, we do have individuals that, and we've done, I think we have a video actually in the goal course interviewing some of the house managers, but we'll have one individual that will oversee access to the kitchen, because we want to make sure that these people aren't in the kitchen all day long eating up all your food. Number one, because it's going to cost you a lot of money. But number two, you want your clients to be healthy. You don't want them getting diabetes from eating all day long. So one single kitchen is good enough. Next question. If you had to term the stay of a resident for failing to adhere to the rules for the home, and let's say rent is received on the 1st and you had to discontinue the person's stay on the 10th, would you prorate the rent? Okay, great question.